Welcome everybody. Thanks for being here tonight for this conversation with W. Michelle Harris and Amanda Chestnut. In a few minutes you'll hear from these two, inspired by Michelle's public artwork, Nia Panes, which is currently installed outdoors. You're surrounded by our annual members exhibition. This year is a banger. There's like 500 pieces here, over 500 pieces by our members. Make note of this beautiful and rich and incredibly eclectic exhibition. I want to thank and recognize our small but mighty team here at RoCo. You saw Anna and Jess at the front, and Alyssa, and Kaylin is running the camera. Join me in thanking everybody for all their work. All of our exhibitions here at RoCo are supported by the New York State Council on the Arts, Farish Foundation, Monroe County, and the Suzanne Gouvernay Arts Fund, and about 1,000 other members. We have a long history of supporting artists who are engaging in meaningful dialogue about important issues, and creating space for conversations just like tonight is really integral to what we do. So I want to thank all of you for supporting us. In case you hadn't noticed, the arts are absolutely under attack in this country. It's not just a funding question. The federal government is directly antagonistic, hostile toward the arts. We're not going to shift away from our history of supporting artists who are addressing important issues through their work. And we're also going to do our best to insulate ourselves from the funding whims of the federal government. And I'm sure you're hearing from many small organizations who need your help. So I just want to encourage everybody to support our peer organizations. Nia Panes reimagines the tradition of the memorial stained glass through a contemporary lens. And this project honors Anna Marie Douglas, Hester Jeffrey, and Austin Steward, three foundational, though still lesser known figures in Rochester's early history. This work reflects on how their legacies in abolition, suffrage, organizing, and community building continue to flow through our city today. And Michelle has created several other public artworks and exhibitions, some other projects you've seen here at RoCo, that also memorialize Rochester's African American history, celebrating leaders and activists who deserve broader recognition. And Amanda's work, especially with In This Moment, matches that effort in a really powerful way, namely collecting and archiving interviews that honor living elders and important figures in Rochester's Black community. Together, their practices ask us how we remember, who we celebrate, and how stories are carried forward across generations. Beginning with Amanda, please join me in welcoming two extraordinary cultural workers helping to shape how Rochester remembers its past and honors its present. Welcome, Amanda and Michelle.
Hi everybody, my name is Amanda. It's nice to meet you. I got a little bit of an introduction to the crowd from Blue, so Michelle, I want to start with, who are you and what do you do? I recognize you as a visual artist, predominantly working in video and in computer sciences. What do you do?
What I do during the daytime is I teach at RIT. I teach students who go on to be web developers and game developers and the stuff on your mobile phone. Interactive developers work at a bank, work at an advertising agency, whatever. They make really cool stuff. When I'm not doing that or grading, sometimes I get inspired and feel the need to say something or do something or express something. And sometimes it starts with me looking through my own history, which gets sticky, and then I wander over to Rochester history, and then an interactive visual installation happens because of that. Using my computer skills and visual skills, but not all the time. Sometimes it's just a photograph, sometimes it's a weird collage, it just depends. And also what the current call for work is from RoCo.
So I became first familiar with your work actually through Rachel Guzman. and you were doing video art in that space, and then I saw your work in the Finger Lakes show at the Memorial Art Gallery that I toured, and also the work that you had in the biennial festival that Blue had a few years ago, pre-COVID. It was up in the Gannett building?
Yeah, it was in the window of the newspaper building.
So prior to seeing these works installed outside, a lot of the work that I had seen from you was digital and video based. Also, a lot of it had an element of physicality to it, an element of viewer engagement and how the viewer was in space with the work shaped how the viewer engaged with the work and saw the work. Can you talk a little bit about the importance of that physicality in your art?
I will say I've been taking dance classes forever. Yay, Donna. And so that's probably part of it. Also, I like to use like real stuff, even in my videos, digital video, whatever, that I'm programming. I like to use video of real stuff as opposed to like simulating 3D. It's all meant to be a conversation, hopefully an elegant conversation, but still a conversation with whoever is watching or engaging. One of the pieces I did a while ago was more, I guess, explicit, even more physical. I had 3 different dresses from 3 phases of my life, and I had fans under them, and I had sensors on each one, and I had projected video on each one, but the video was like conveying, like there was green for fresh out of prom, and there was blue one, and then there was fall leaves for the dress that had an apron on it for like after having the kid and whatnot. But when somebody walked in front of a dress, that's when the video would come on, spotlighting that dress, and also a fan underneath would make the dress move as if it was dancing. So I do like to make physical conversations even when I'm not there.
So how do you see these works that are outside of RoCo being either in line with that or a change from how that has been in your work in the past?
I'd say it's not really so much a conversation. It is, I guess, more in line with the kind of stuff that I grew up with in various churches, right? Where there's the story in the window that conveys something. I don't do church anymore, but I still love the windows. You know, these 3 people that I've come to know just from learning very recently about Rochester history, and these aren't the only 3, but there are 3 that kind of came to the forefront for me and that I wanted to feature.
So you chose Anna Marie Douglas, we know her name, Austin Steward, we should know his name as well. Hester Jeffrey was a new name for me prior to seeing this project. How did you make the choices of who to feature specifically for this wall?
I was looking for people who had done a lot here, were very involved here, had organized here, but also maybe not top of mind when people think Black history in Rochester. Although Austin Steward lately has gotten Plaza and a lot of things named after him in the last couple years, but that's a new development.
So when you're thinking about historic figures, because a lot of the work that I've seen you do also is like naming names, but in a good way.
Yeah.
Not like naming names like pointing a finger, but naming names as in recalling, calling out to, reaching out to often even. Where are those choices? Like, where are you getting the information about these? Because if we're looking at historic figures, it's not like you can call up your friend and be like, hey, you know so-and-so? Where are you getting that information from?
They've kind of accumulated over the years. So I've done searches on, for these folks, I did searches on abolitionists, Black women abolitionists will lead to things. The installation that I did a while ago that was calling up names of people who lived in Rochester in the past. I actually went to the Rochester Public Library, and I found an archived Rochester history website, was linked from somewhere else, to find names of people who had just lived here, and somehow found a phone book that had almost been completely overtaken by spam, but not quite yet. And so I was able to get that phone book list of names. Apparently, it was segregated up to the point where Frederick Douglass said that they shouldn't be segregated, but I managed to get one that was, before it was desegregated, with that list of names. And that's what went into the installation that was at the newspaper window. But later on, looking for names of Rochester abolitionists, that's when I met Hester Jeffrey.
So who is Hester Jeffrey?
I'm gonna cheat.
I'm not here to judge. I couldn't answer that off the top of my head.
I want to get it right. She lived here 1891 to 1915. Community organizer, suffragist. She did the Political Equality Club, Women's Christian Temperance Union, and this was the one that got me, national organizer for the National Association of Colored Women's Clubs. That was the big one for me. She also did the eulogy for Susan B. She did a lot. Yeah, pretty serious organizer, locally, but also at a national level.
So you've made these choices. You've looked through historic records to find names that stand out in ways that they engaged in the community. How do you decide, now that you've got this pool of names that to draw from over the years of collecting this knowledge, how do you decide what medium people get placed into? If you're kind of a conceptual artist, how do you choose between digital art that's print or video art or photographic art? Like, how do you make those choices? Who gets put where?
These two have both been in video as well, in interactive video, in a mosaic video when I was doing the installation. That was in that room, the Shigobani installation with the little mosaics of Black women, included among others, those two. But the call for work specifically was for print to go in a window. So prints to go in a window. And because I am not a painter, I'm not expert with my line and representation, this is a digital mosaic.
What's a digital mosaic? Can you tell people?
That is
like how? I'm used to
Photoshop.
mosaics being Elmer's and scissors. How do you make a digital mosaic?
I did this in Photoshop.
Okay.
I did this in Photoshop. You can see down here in the corner, that is a snapshot of Photoshop view of this particular image, and it's assembly, a lot of layers, a lot of in-between layers while I was figuring stuff out. And we've got the water, we've got the name, we've got the outlines for the panels of the background. We've got the logo getting multiplied with things, well, I guess technically differenced with things, and color added to things. And then we've got the portrait itself. So it's a lot of layers building up to make this collage.
So you touched on the water. This is Lake Ontario?
This is Lake Ontario.
Why Lake Ontario? Why the water?
Well, because it's Lake Ontario. Because that is the path to freedom for a lot of people. And then for some people, like Austin Steward, it was actually the path to enslavement, but he got away from that. Lake Ontario is just a part of this place. And so I use Lake Ontario because it's conveniently located for me to get footage from, but also because it's meaningful.
So when you are, one of the artists that we talked about, and in previous conversations, one of the artists that came up was talking about Du Bois and the World Fair. I want you, if you feel comfortable, speaking a little bit on the historic precedent of Black art as anthropological work.
All right, so Du Bois, who did sociology and history and activism and Pan-African organizing and politics, all that stuff. But at the 1915 World's Fair, there was a human zoo featuring us in all the worst ways, and he wanted to counter-program against that. And so he commissioned portraits of Black people. And I do mean formal portraits, dressed up, nice photographs. So those were on display at the World's Fair. And yes, it was intentional respectability politics at play, because the alternative was so awful. So made something so bright and so beautiful and so collectively wonderful to represent the community. I've used those images in lots of my work over the years. It's powerful. Also, I think that's the year of birth of the nation. So it was just, that was a rough time.
Do you see your work as being aligned with that level of commentary on contemporary Blackness? The kind of statement that Du Bois was trying to make was really looking at American Blackness as a distinct, separate, actual culture, and really quantifying that, and not just showing it in pictures, but developing infographics for it. This was very early infographics, very, very early cultural anthropology. Are you doing that with now stuff, or are you looking back and making his comments on the history of what it is that's contained in your art?
I am trying to borrow a little bit of that shine, I admit. I'm definitely not like Pan-Africanist organizer around the world, sociologist, historian, etc. But don't forget, I forgot, science fiction writer as well. He just did everything. What I'm generally trying to do is create cool stuff that reflects us and reflects our depth as well. And so I am here because of the people, my ancestors who came before me, whether they were awesome people or maybe not so awesome people, I am here. But there are some awesome people in Rochester, and while I'm here, I want to reflect that for the people of Rochester and capture that and share that. So it's not about the woes of, but like, we were here, or y'all were here, did stuff, your people did stuff before, y'all might even have the same family names, but it should be familiar and part of you.
Where else do you source inspiration from when you are looking at what to model your artwork on? The churches and the glass windows and how did you get from Austin Steward to the stained glass windows?
The stained glass windows actually happened because right there is this beautiful church with stained glass windows, and I thought it would be so cool if that was echoed over here. So they are my flavor of stained glass windows as opposed to Anglican or whatever kind of windows they are, but it was definitely a deliberate echo of what's going on next door.
Because so much of your artwork contains a digital component, how do you work on turning code into art? How do you translate the day job of teaching people how to make beautiful things into your own artistic practice? And follow-up question, which I can come back to again and reiterate at the end. Isn't that exhausting?
The art, doesn't happen that often. Sometimes an idea hits me or a need hits me, and coincidentally, that's often when I have a pile of grading in front of me. But sometimes it actually is kind of motivated by like events going on in the world. Like I Can't Breathe Mirror is one of the works that I've done, and that was, we found out about it, right? Not when it happened, but we found out about it. And then a month later, I'm like, okay, I have this installation that has this mosaic of Barbies, but that code exists. Let me use it for this instead. And then spend a month and build that. So I do reuse code sometimes, for sure. Yeah, so it's usually in the in-between in the summer. It's more likely to happen.
As someone who has left academia and has stopped teaching in order to make more art, I'm always curious about how people hold a creative job and also still have creativity left over to make things with.
Yes. It's not going to happen, say, this spring. Nothing else is going to happen this spring. This summer, sure, absolutely. After about a month of recovery, something might happen, something might not. It's definitely an in-between, and unless I get super inspired, it's not happening during the school year. There was one year where it was very close to not making it on time because I needed to get it done.
Do you see yourself ever frustrated with that necessity of being in the classroom? Are you ever like, I'm gonna phone it in this week and just stay home and make art instead? Is the classroom experience feeding you enough during the year?
It depends. I don't think I've ever felt so much need to make art that I needed to abandon class. Again, it's usually like toward the end of the semester, and the fun part where I'm engaging with students is done and I have to grade their final stuff. That's the danger point. Finding a distraction, yes, this will work. Winter break is really short, so usually not then unless it's an emergency, like a call for work. And then something will happen, but the scale of it might be smaller.
You said you're a visit code. Do you ever work iteratively? Do you
Absolutely.
return to works 5-10 years later and use them again or recycle them again or push them in a
Yes.
different direction?
Yes. I think Barbie Mirror was in the aughts. That was my first go at an interactive mosaic video.
Interactive mosaic.
Interactive mosaic. It is a mosaic of Barbie images sourced from the internet, like eBay and things like that, just their heads, and made a mosaic of that with a webcam attached to a computer. Whatever image is coming to the webcam, when you come up to it, it's going to replace like a little square with a Barbie head with the same level of brightness. It's basically a photo mosaic, but video. And Barbies. So that was the first one. And then I turned that into the Can't Breathe mirror several years later. And in that case, the photos were of Black folks who had been killed by police, going back to a couple of Black Panthers in Chicago. And going forward, I think I showed it like 2 or 3 times, and each time I would add more people, because unfortunately there's always more of us to add. And the goal is not always possible. With men especially, you're not happy about smiling. But the goal is to find nice images of them in life and breathing. And of course, as an interactive mosaic, interacting with it are breathing, just that give and take. And with that, and this is what you saw in Rachel's space, with that, a list of names of those folks and white lace and candle votives as a memorial.
So I want to loop back and think about how you were just saying in the World's Fair exposition at the turn of the century, what Du Bois was doing was in part rooted in respectability, politics, and optics. And you were just mentioning deliberately looking for images of people who were smiling and really struggling with finding people smiling all of the
Men do
time.
not smile in pictures. I don't know what the deal is.
Not nearly. They need to be serious. It's dramatic that way. I think that how we approach respectability politics as Black culture has changed pretty dramatically in the last 100 years. Is I think, a fair assessment. I think that respectability politics, which culturally used to be much more required for public engagement outside of the Black community, is now not maybe as important. How do you navigate that in your artwork?
I'll talk about how I came to the angle of the Can't Breathe Mirror. It was definitely for us. Like there's been artwork about those events that have been very like dramatic and red and blood involved and guns and things like that. And what I wanted to do was celebrate those lives instead. And the audience, again, was us. Like there are people who walk by that and have no idea who those people are, and that's fine. And then there are people who do recognize. There's even been an event where a person recognized their friend. Yeah, I make works for us. And sometimes the us doesn't necessarily specifically include me, but I make work for us.
Yeah, can you expand? I had, for us is a thing, especially within this moment, that I bring up a lot. Like, I'm doing this for us. What does that mean to you when you say, I'm doing this for us? Who is us in that
So
statement?
it's not meant to be to generate sadness or shock or shame. It's meant to generate joy, maybe a bittersweet one, but still meant to generate joy and pride and a sense of rootedness.
For whom?
For Black people in general, for Black people in Rochester. If I did this for my folks in Virginia, depending on what the artwork is. For women, if we're talking about the Barbie mirror, and recognizing the many roles we play, the many lives we have to lead all at the same time and manage not very well doing it. So it is depending on who I am being at the moment for us.
When I say for us, that in this moment is for us, I take a pretty broad view of who us is, and it is a thing that I see in Black culture, having grown up as a third-gen American on my mother's side of the family. I've also seen it in immigrant culture, where us is not just the immediate people in the room who you know, but us also has a sense of both past and present.
Absolutely.
When I say I'm doing this for us, it is both to honor ancestors and for people who aren't even born yet.
Mm-hmm.
Thoughts?
Oh, that's absolutely an awesome way to say it, yes.
In what sense then is the artwork for you? Is it at all?
Oh yeah, I mean, I like how it looks.
That's good.
It is my aesthetic at work, my take on Lake Ontario, my weird choice of fonts, my apologies. I like how it looks. Even if it wasn't for me, I enjoyed how it looks. I feel it was okay enough to share it with everybody.
Does anyone have questions?
I wonder if you could each comment on the way in which, Michelle, you said that your project here and other projects, they're making visible kind of scant historical little bits, breadcrumbs that you've been able to find, right?
Mm-hmm.
And in this case, I think you're dealing with the sole image of each of these figures, right? The only photograph.
I looked, but yeah, that's all I could find is different forms of these.
Right. So I wonder if you could comment at all on how, you're infinitely making more visible these folks, and yet, and Amanda's work within this moment is sort of making sure that future generations are never in that situation. I wonder if you each have any comments on the kind of the abundance of the historical record, and how you're both also creating the historical record.
You're creating it, go first.
So in this moment, we make chapbooks. Each of them is only about 20 pages, and each book has 15 to 20 photographs of each person in it. And I'm the person in charge of hiring the photographers and the writers and teaming them together to tell these stories. One of the exhibitions I've curated in the past was at Rush Breeze at the University of Rochester in their historic artifact part of the library, and it was looking at some of the artifacts that are in that collection on Frederick Douglass. So I am pretty aware of how important the portrait was to Douglas and how he kind of codified, I think, for a lot of Black people, even up to now, how we approach the ethnography of why portraits are important. And it is a point that I walk carefully in that I don't want to accidentally engage in respectability politics by making sure everything is as pretty as it should be. And there are some beautiful, beautiful portraits in this series, and they're just magnificent, and I've seen some really fabulous artworks. But I don't tell the photographers that they've got to make anybody look a certain way. I let everybody tell the story how they need to tell it the right way. I'm not constricting that onto any of these projects, and I think that I shirk responsibility, or shirk accepting responsibility for any level of respectability politics by placing that onus on the photographers for them to handle that. This winter we lost our first elder who was able to participate in the project. Miss Midge Thomas passed this year, and last December. It was a real honor to work with her, but also I was able to witness firsthand for her how important it made her feel to have her story told by a Black photographer and by Black writers in her words in a way that really uplifted and centered her. Because, and she would say, like, I got awards. I got this award, I got that award, I got all this stuff. But this was the thing that came from the community. And she said that was what made it so important to her, was to be held up in this way by the community. And so I don't, that whole, like, how do you, where's the line? Where is the line in what it is that you're doing? And I think that for me, that falls under intent. It's the same thing, the artist who I really admire, Brenda, Upstate Girls, if you look it up outside of Albany. Yeah, this woman's an absolute whirlwind of brilliance, and I really admire her. And she has done basically what winds up being an ethnographic study on these young people who have grown up now, several generations of folks outside of the Albany area.
It's still going.
It is.
Oh my God.
I'm pretty sure she's still doing Upstate Girl stuff. I haven't seen her in a little while. Somebody asked her, how do you keep it from being torture porn? And I think that there is also a lot of grief in Black stories, and she said the same way you make regular pornography not porn anymore, is you do it with love. Mm-hmm. And that kind of shifts that mindset for me of how do I do this so I'm not exploiting my friends, my colleagues, the elders in the community, because I'm not interested in doing that for me, especially. But I think that approaching it with a sense of love is what changes that mindset.
When you have people who are being photographed or videoed in a way that they appreciate, in a way that they would like, as opposed to being like, you sit like this and like that, and you wear this, makes all the difference. I don't ever want to be like the snippets of information that I find on the whatever will be the internet in the future. I don't want it to be like the only version I have of somebody's speech is the one, and I'm thinking of Sojourner Truth here, the one that somebody imagined how she would speak and added pidgin to the language and stuff like that. And Sojourner Truth is not from the South. She was a Dutch-speaking person, and the way she spoke was very different from the speech that's on people's posters and embroideries and stuff. And so hearing about that, I'm very careful about what I choose to represent or not, and so I try and kind of play it safe, especially if I'm dabbling in somebody else's history, to stick with things that I'm sure about to the level that I'm sure about and not go any further than that.
Hi. So I see that the figures that you chose to include were historical figures of the abolitionist movement or era in Rochester. Did you come across, and also I know in the civil rights era of the 60s, or the 50s and 60s, Rochester also had, historical figures.
Oh yeah.
Were there any was there a reason why you chose the abolitionist movement specifically? come across or think about other figures during the civil rights era?
One motivation is I did not want to stomp on some photographer's right to their photo and use that in my art. And that was one major reason why I often stick with like this era photos, public domain versus current era where ask permission, licensing, and things like that. And also living people.
Yeah, there's still a lot of being familiar with, even if many of the elders from that era have passed, many of their children are our age. So we would be directly corresponding with peers and colleagues about that level of image work. Not that it's impossible, but public domain makes things a lot easier.
And again, it's not my family, so I don't want to claim more than I should claim.
Michelle, I have a question for you about audience. So I saw this outside, and I was thinking about the space and all that stuff. I think you and I saw it at the same time. It is different to look at something huge on the side of a building than it is obviously to see art inside with special lights, and then the door is locked and all that. So, and you do a lot of this, so it's more like an installation and that's like an exhibit. So talk a little bit about how you think about the audience perceiving what you do, like when it happens, how it happens.
Yeah, so for this work, I actually did kind of, like I had a photo of the side of RoCo and I was trying out, like scaling down and trying to fit it in the rectangles of the windows, like does that kind of work? As far as the scale of things, can I see stuff? When I'm doing like visuals behind performances, I actually try to stay with abstract shapes and softer shapes because I'm trying to foreground and highlight and complement what the people are doing in front or what the musicians are doing in front, and my visuals are not supposed to be the star per se. They're supposed to like complement the story that is going on, that people are dancing or performing in some way. And when I'm doing those, I like if it's a weird stage, like in like what used to be the Lyric Theater or in Kilbourne Hall or stuff, I do take a picture of the space and I try and think about how my visuals are going to work in that space. If I need to cut out some kind of frame to make it work, but I absolutely try and make it so that my visuals for that are kind of like virtual set background and not like some precious movie in a square in a frame, right? It's just supposed to be part of the space that they are working in and not a separate thing from the space they are working in. And so, and in this case, we are working in a window as opposed to a different kind of picture, I guess. So it's trying to be familiar with the kind of thing that would be in a window with the stained glass look. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you.